Anyways, let's get back to the news because it's time to talk about Barcelona's financial situation, because we do have an update from Barcelona's Vice President of Finance. His name is Eduard Romeu, not to be confused with Oriol Romeu, who is the absolute wall in the midfield. Anyways, Eduard Romeu gave us an update about Barcelona's financial situation. There is a very important assembly with the club members, or a meeting with the club members, scheduled for this Saturday, October 21st, where Barcelona is going to present the entire budget from last year to the club members, explain to them where the money went, how much money they made, etc., what they spend on, break it all down, and that has to be approved by the members. And then Barcelona will also present the forecast for this upcoming year, which also has to be approved by the club members. So this meeting is on October 21st, incredibly important meeting. And Eduard Romeu gave us kind of a preview of what Barcelona is going to present during this meeting to the club members. Now, the report was very, very long. It went into everything, but I read it. Don't worry. I've highlighted only the important parts. I'm not going to bore you with how much money Barcelona spent on toilet paper. I'm going to give you just the big numbers so you know what kind of financial situation the club is in. Now, forgive me for putting my glasses. I didn't memorize these numbers. It's a lot of numbers. But the biggest and most important thing is that in the year 2022 to 2023, so that's the last fiscal year, Barcelona reported 304 million euros in profit. This is not revenue. This is absolute profit. 304 million euros, which is absolutely huge, because Barcelona have been losing money for the past, 4 or 5 seasons under Bartomeu. And finally, not only are we not losing money, but we were able to make 304 million euros. Now, the forecast for this upcoming year, the 2023-2024, is that Barcelona will make a revenue of 11 million euros. Now, you might say, well, how did we make 300 million last year, and now we're only going to make 11 million? Well, there's 2 reasons for that. First of all, part of the profits from last year is the economic levers, where Barcelona sold assets. So we won't have that this upcoming year because Barcelona haven't sold any assets. You might say, well, what about Barca Studios, the Libero, etc.? That still counts as last year. Okay? So there's not going to be any economic levers this upcoming year. That's why the forecast for the revenue, it will be smaller. The second reason is, of course, the Olympic Stadium. Olympic Stadium, where Barcelona are currently playing, has almost half the capacity of the Camp Nou. So that's half the amount of ticket sales, half the amount of merchandise that people buy at the stadium, half the amount in food and drinks that people buy at the stadium, etc., etc., etc. So that's part of the reason why we're going to go from making 300 million euros last year to 11 million euros this upcoming year. But of course, that is expected to then increase once we go back to the Spotify Camp Nou, to the renovated Spotify Camp Nou, which I'm very excited to see. So that's the number one big numbers. Again, 304 million euros revenue last year, 11 million euros forecast next year. The next thing is that the debt has been reduced from 1.3 billion, 1.3.5 billion euros to 1.2. So from 1,350 million euros to 1,200 million euros. Barcelona have reduced their debt by 150 million euros. Now, you might say, how is this good news? We've only reduced it by 150. It is good news because when Barcelona, or when Laporta took over the club was spending more than what it was actually earning. That means the debt was growing and growing and growing. Before you can reduce your debt, first you have to stop it from growing. So that means bringing your expenditure below your revenue, because Barcelona was spending more than what it was actually making. So Barcelona had to increase their revenue with new sponsorship deals, with new partnerships. They had to reduce their spending by doing cuts all across the board, not just the first team, all across the board, getting rid of players, etc. So by increasing the revenue, reducing their spending, Barcelona were able to bring their spending below their revenue. So now they're earning more than what they're actually spending. So that was the first step to stop the debt from growing. Once the debt started growing, now they started working on shrinking it. And they've been able to shrink it by 150 million euros. There's still a long way to go, but The good news is, and this is another thing that Romeu spoke about, is that once Barcelona start playing in the new Spotify Camp Nou, the new Spotify Camp Nou will allow Barcelona to have an extra 150 to 170 million euros a year to pay towards their debt. So again, when we go back to the Spotify Camp Nou, the capacity is going to be increased to 100,000. So that extra revenue will allow Barcelona an extra 150 to 170 million euros to pay towards their debt every year. So that's good news, because in 10 years, we could have that entire debt wiped off. That's if only we use the money from the Spotify Camp Nou. If Barcelona, have extra money from other areas, they can even pay more and end up paying a debt in less than 10 years. So really, really good news on that front. And the last thing is that the wage bill was reduced from 600 million to 492 in the 2022-2023 year. So that doesn't count this summer transfer market. We reduced it even more. But that's good news, because Barcelona need to keep reducing their wage bill, because the less you spend, the more you have left over at the end of the year as profits. The faster you can pay off your debt, the more you can invest, the more you can grow the club, so on and so forth.